If you feel like you keep starting over with fat loss and every time you restart, you are harder on yourself, more strict, more desperate, this video is for you. And even if you have a solid plan, a good workout routine, and you're even balanced your hormones because you are finally on HRT and you are still not seeing results, especially if you struggle with consistency, it might be because you don't understand how stress, urgency, and fear affect your body after 40. This is not something you can out-train. What most women don't realize is that it's not because they keep falling off their plan, it's because their nervous system is hitting its limit. And until you understand that, no program, no matter how good, is going to stick. I have trained well over 1,500 women over the years, and I started to notice something really important. There were some women who would get their program, their workouts, their nutrition, their plan, and they'd start aligning it, and it wasn't perfect, but it was consistent, and they'd begin to see progress. And then there was another group of women, and no matter what we adjusted, no matter how much we tweaked hormones, no matter how much we dialed in the nutrition plan, no matter how many times we changed the training protocol, they could not see any measurable results. Some of them would lose a few pounds or maybe even 20 pounds only to eventually gain it back. Others couldn't stay consistent long enough to even see results, even though they were wildly successful in other areas of life. They showed up to work, they got promotions, they handled responsibility. Some of them were the breadwinners of their family or the head of the PTA. They were intelligent and capable in life. But when it came to their body, they kept starting over. And what I started to notice was that these women had a lot in common. Internally, they were carrying so much stress, a constant sense of tension, moments of urgency, desperation, even despair. Their lives often felt chaotic or at least unpredictable. And almost all of them had a very strong inner critic, paired with a quiet loss of hope. So what did they do? Well, some of them gave up for weeks or months at a time, not because they didn't care, but because they were exhausted and or defeated. Others tried something more extreme, a more aggressive plan, a harder reset, and yes, some of them tried medications like GLP-1s, hoping this would finally be the thing. And others went the opposite direction. They got harsher with themselves, they were more critical internally, and they were more controlling, almost trying to punish themselves into obedience. None of it worked. I used to call these women the resistant fat loss clients, and not because they didn't work hard. But here's what I want you to hear. They weren't resistant because they weren't trying, and they weren't stuck because their hormones weren't balanced. There was something much deeper going on under the surface. What was happening had nothing to do with effort, and it had everything to do with how their nervous system was experiencing stress. Because if fat loss feels impossible, it is not always because you are on the wrong diet or the wrong training plan, or because there is something mysteriously broken about your metabolism that no one has figured out yet. And it is not because you are not trying hard enough. More often, it is because a nervous system that feels threatened or chronically overstressed is going to protect itself first. And protection for the body often looks like holding on to energy, holding on to weight, holding on to fat, holding on to coping mechanisms, or it could look like self-protection, protection to self-sabotage so you don't hope for something to only get disappointed. Women start to then feel overwhelmed all the time. They feel behind, like everything is urgent, like they are constantly trying to catch up with their own body. And from that state, no plan, no matter how good, can be sustained long enough to actually work. A body that doesn't feel safe will always choose survival over fat loss. Their nervous system was running the show. Everything from diet adherence or lack of adherence all the way to self-sabotage, which made them literally gaslight themselves. A body that feels threatened cannot change even if the plan is perfect. I like to think about it this way, like a bank account. When your nervous system is under constant stress, it is like your account is overdrawn. And when you are overdrawn, the bank doesn't let you make big withdrawals. It doesn't care how good your intentions are. It is going to lock things down until there's safety again. Fat loss is a withdrawal. And when your system is already in debt emotionally, hormonally, spiritually, energetically, your body says, no, we are holding on to everything right now. Imagine trying to remodel your house while the fire alarm is going off. You wouldn't start making upgrades. You would focus on getting everyone safe first. That is exactly what your body does. When the nervous system is in chaos, it sets off an alarm. And fat loss is not a priority. Safety is. When your body is in a state of fear, urgency, or desperation, it becomes almost impossible to send a clear signal of safety. And without safety, you don't get calm. Without calm, you don't get consistency. You get chaos. Women start to feel overwhelmed all the time. They feel behind, like everything is urgent, like they are constantly trying to catch up with their own body. And from that state, no plan, no matter how good, can be sustained long enough to actually work. A body doesn't feel safe will always choose survival over fat loss. And this is why so many women think they fell off the plan, or they just need to get it together or start again on Monday, when really their nervous system just couldn't tolerate the pressure anymore. This is why habit-based approaches or effort-based approaches stop working. When we are operating from urgency or fear or frustration, or if you are desperate to make a change and go into an attempt to change your body with the narrative that this time I will commit, your body doesn't hear motivation. It hears pressure. It hears fear. It hears inadequacy. You may be able to make short-term progress from this point, but for most people, it will eventually be too much and unsustainable. So when we understand the nervous system, this is something that I love showing to clients, because when I show it to them, it then makes sense. So here we have a window of tolerance chart. And I love this because it explains a lot of what we need to what needs to happen. And I like the little faces I drew, right? So when we have something up here like hypoarousal, okay, that's being accelerated, that's being anxious, sometimes angry, sometimes fearful, these elevated type of emotions. And then we have down here, we have hypoarousal, these lower feelings, defeated, sad, depressed, gloom, desperate, okay? And in here, we have our window of tolerance. All right, so when we have this looking, and we look at calm, confident, curious, contentment, right? These are just some of the C words that we see. We can also have centered. We can have curious. Oh, I think curious was on there. Was it? Yes, curious was on there. But a lot of times, we have to look, and when we look at hyperarousal, where we have fear, anxiety, panic, aggression, anger, right? Where do we notice that we tend to live most of the time? And when we begin to understand this, we begin to see that if we were to track where we were emotionally with how we're showing up with our ability to stick to our diet plan, to stick with our workouts, to be organized, to be systemized, because this is what is required in order to lose weight. And a lot of people struggle, not necessarily with finding the right plan. We all know we need to eat a lot of protein. We know we need to eat fiber. We know we need to work out 3 to 4 times per week. We know that we need to drink water. We know that we need to sleep well. We know that we need to do these basic things. But a lot of times it's the how that becomes a really big problem. So when we look again at this chart, where would you say that you are most of the time? Right? Would you say that you're constantly in the calm, confident, curious, contentment place? Okay. Or would you say you're in the hypoarousal place? I know for myself, I spent most of my time in hyperarousal. I spent most of my time in fear, in anxiety, in stress, in chaos, right? I didn't fall to the hypoarousal point, right? That wasn't where my nervous system tended to go, but mine was always up on this upper part of the window, right? It was very rare that I was in, okay, this calm, confident, curious, content place. It was very rare that I was in that window. When I was in that window, everything worked out wonderfully. But I didn't make that connection. And a lot of clients, when it comes to showing up with their bodies, showing up to be consistent, showing up to execute their nutrition protocols, right? Because we know we need a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. We know if we are insulin resistant that we have to eat lower carbs. Okay, we know certain things are going to happen, right? Our physiology is going to want carbs just because we're insulin resistant, for example. But if we are in one of these other windows, if we are in that hyperarousal window, or if we are in the hypo, right, the down part, or if we are up here, we are going to succumb to the things that we try to use willpower against. So when clients start to track their nervous system and they start to see, using the window of tolerance is just one example of what you can use. There are so many different methodologies to help you recognize, where am I in this window? Am I in the calm, confident, curious, contentment place? Okay, or am I always up here? Because if I'm always up here, it is going to be really hard to sustain executing protocols. So what's the answer then? Okay, how do we figure out? So if you're sitting there saying, well, Jennifer, I am always in this hyperarousal place. I am constantly up here. So what am I supposed to do about it, right? I don't know how to change it. There are definite methods to learn how to get our nervous system to ebb and flow, right? We hear all the rage about breath work and meditation and all of these things. These are resources, ways to resource calm. They are not the cure. I'll be honest with you. It is a tool that we use. And I'm going to give you one of the very, very strong habits that you can learn, because this is the one habit that if you get really good at this, right, you can make a significant difference in your ability to stay on plan long enough, right, so that you can begin to see progress. Because I have seen this happen so many times. Weeks would go by, sometimes 2, 3, 4 weeks would go by with a client, and maybe they were not seeing progress as to what they thought progress should be. And inside, their nervous system was getting more anxious. Their nervous system was getting more agitated. Their nervous system was becoming more self-defeating, right? And as they begin to feel this pressure build up, they would step on the scale, not see progress, step on the scale, not see progress, right? What would end up happening is they would end up self-sabotaging, and not because they wanted to see themselves fail, but because they just could not tolerate the pressure anymore, right? And part of that had a lot to do with a self-belief. Part of that had a lot to do with nervous system behavior. Part of that had to do with the colliding between the two, which then caused self-sabotaging. And the self-sabotaging then caused the reaffirmation of the belief that I just can't do this, which isn't really true. But when we can stay more settled, more centered, okay, and we are not going to be like the Dalai Lama all the time. Even the Dalai Lama, right, has moments outside of its window, right? But it knows how to get back into that state of centered and calm. Because if you're in that state of centered calm more often, right, you are going to be able to say, you know what, I know I want to eat this bagel for breakfast and it's not on my plan. I know I am craving this bagel. You're going to be able to respond to that craving way differently than if you are in a state of anxiety or panic or stress or overwhelm. And FYI, there's nothing wrong with having bagels for breakfast, but if it's not going to fit your plan, right, then you have to be able to handle, right, that moment with food. Or the same thing goes with the moment of having to go to your workout, okay? For me, going to a workout at 6 p.m. at night is really hard. I am tired. I am overwhelmed. I am depleted, right? And I can say to myself, well, okay, I missed yesterday. this is my second day. I'm allowed to miss my second day because I give myself certain rules because I'm talking to myself from a centered place. But if I was not in that centered place and I was in a state of hypo-arousal or hyper-arousal, anxious, fearful, stressed, angry, right? I would talk to myself very differently when I'm in that place. I would say to myself, see, you just can't manage to make this work. You are somebody who just doesn't commit. You can't manage to get 2 workouts in when you say you're going to get that in. That's going to sound very different than if I was within my window. So now if we add our window of tolerance issue, along with perimenopause and menopause, hormonal chaos is going to amplify these responses. Stress hits way harder. Life stressors start to compound, and it's quiet. It's quiet, and then all of a sudden it builds. This cumulative stress just starts to build. So the answer to how to handle this, right, basically is called attunement. And what is attunement? I described it to somebody today. When we are parenting and we have our babies and our babies start to cry, okay, and we notice the baby's crying and we say, oh, well, no, the baby's been fed. No, the baby's diaper has been changed. That's not it. Maybe the baby has gas. Maybe the baby's teething, right? So we're trying to be curious. We're being curious about the baby, right? And trying to get an idea for what's going on. And we can sense that this baby is very distressed. So sometimes what do? We take the baby and we start rocking, okay? And we start attuning and we start trying to help the baby co-regulate, right? And start to calm down and start to find its sense of calm. And we can do that with ourselves, but often we don't take the time to do that. Attunement is pretty much learning to notice when effort is coming from fear versus safety and adjusting before your body escalates. Attunement is like noticing a traffic light. Is it red? Is it yellow? Is it green? Most women see a red light and they don't stop. They try to change their body while they are running red lights, exhausted, stressed, wired, and then they blame themselves when things fall apart. That's not a discipline problem. That's what happens when you override a signal instead of responding to it. So fat loss becomes possible when your body feels met, not managed. When I say the one thing that changes fat loss after 40 is attunement, I don't mean meditation or positive thinking. I mean learning to notice where your effort is coming from. If your effort is coming from fear, urgency, panic, your nervous system hears threat, and a body in threat doesn't change, it protects. We have to operate from a calm, grounded place. That's why fat loss becomes possible when your body feels met, not managed. Before asking your body to change, you have to notice how it is experiencing the ask. And what that means is, are you asking it to respond and are you trying to get it to bend to your will? Or are you meeting your body's needs with compassion, with curiosity? What do I need? What do I really need? With kindness, okay? With listening, right? We override some of our own signals many times. And when we override our own signals, we wonder why we hit a wall. So we hit a wall and then we find that we burn out. And then we look and we're like, I haven't been tracking my food. At night, I start eating a lot of different things. I always fall apart after 4 p.m. And a lot of this has to do with lack of attunement. And attunement is really learning to listen to your body's signals. There are many people who go through the whole day and don't even drink water. And you ask, don't you get thirsty? I don't know. I don't think so, right? But they'll eat. But they're not attuned enough to notice, like, is that actually my body wanting food or is it wanting water? There's a lot of times that we will deny ourselves. We will say, gosh, I really feel tired, but I know I need to get my workout in. These are very fine gray places. And if we are not knowing where we're operating from, and again, I go back to the window, right? If I am answering these questions from this place and I am trying to attune to myself in this place versus this place, I am likely going to get some very wrong answers. And then those people, they're constantly tripping over, right? They're constantly restarting. They're constantly losing 10 pounds, gaining 10 pounds, losing 20 pounds, gaining 15 pounds, taking 5 steps forward, 5 steps back. Okay. And a lot of it has to do with recognizing your nervous system. So when I hear someone say, I did really well for 2 weeks and I was able to lose 3 or 4 pounds, but then I don't know, I just kind of lost it. I just, I have to get back on it. I just lost my momentum. I stopped meal prepping. And they look at the habits, right? The habits are great, right? Habits are important. But we can't discipline or willpower ourselves into doing habits when we are not in our healthy window of tolerance at least 80% of the time, I would like to say. Or to build the capacity to handle the ebbs and flows. So when I am hyper aroused, right, how do I learn to manage that anxiety, stress, and overwhelm and be able to operate in it and not have everything fall apart? So I'm basically then, I go back to my little window, okay? I'm keeping 1 foot in my window, 1 foot out, but I still have 1 foot in, okay? I don't have both feet up here. A lot of times people live many weeks or days up here, or many weeks or days down here, and they have no ability to get back in here. And they have to be able to get back in there in order to operate from a place that is strength-based versus fear-based. The one thing women need for fat loss after 40 isn't another plan. It's really the ability to recognize when their nervous system is in threat and bring it back to safety before asking their body to change.